What's up, everybody? Welcome into Group Chat Football Live. I am Peter Ariz alongside D Money. And it's ironic, D, because the title of this show is Portal Deadline. Time is of the essence, but we've pushed this episode back a bunch today. So we apologize to those of you who were waiting in the lobby there, waiting to watch live. We appreciate those who are joining us now. And remember, as always, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. We're over 1,000 subscribers. We appreciate everyone's support for helping get us there as we continue to grow this page. It's been about a month here that we've been running this show daily, live, Group Chat Football Live. We talk portal movement, coaching movement, and the deadline's coming up here as the enrollment for most of these schools is happening this week through the end of the week, D. So portal's wrapping up here, but still a lot of crazy things happening.
Coaching changes. I mean, you look at Penn State, which we'll talk about here in a second, a team that was just playing for a national championship. Now you see defensive coordinator changes, major announcements coming back. Of course, portal is still rolling with a lot of teams. You see a lot of FCS players making the move to FBS, which is going to be interesting to watch at big programs. UNLV, which we always love to talk about, had a monster 5 days. We will be talking about UNLV like we have been doing a ton during this portal season because they've been making a lot of news. A lot to get to. Excited. Appreciate everybody joining the chat and live and watching us now. Remember to like and subscribe if you haven't done so.
So you alluded to Penn State, huge day for them. And we'll start with the coaching side of things here, as it looks like Clemson is going to pluck their defensive coordinator, Tom Allen, who was there for one season this year, the former head coach at Indiana. He said that he was initially maybe planning on taking some time off, but he's not really a guy who rests well. So coaches this year at Penn State, obviously an awesome year for them up there. And Penn State, a bit of a reputation now being built there under James Franklin of guys who come in there, have success as a DC and go on to whether it's a head coaching job as we see with Brent Pry, Manny Diaz. And then now Tom Allen, who some would say it's a lateral move, but Clemson coming in and again, a huge hire for them defensively here, as Clemson was 47th in the country in scoring defense, Penn State 6th. A guy in Tom Allen who is as experienced as it gets.
Yeah, former head coach. So you look at that Penn State staff. A lot of former head coaches, a lot of current head coaches, right? Particularly the defensive coordinator position. You got Brent Pry, of course, now the head coach at Virginia Tech. Manny Diaz, who was a former head coach when he took the job, leaving Miami, now a head coach at Duke. Tom Allen at Indiana, head coach, goes to Penn State, has a great year, and now on to Clemson to be the defensive coordinator. Interesting move because, look, I mean, Clemson was – they're both these teams were playoff teams. You're seeing one playoff team to another, but Penn State was the better team than Clemson this year. So that's kind of a curious move. What led to it? Was it finances? Was it some interpersonal control issues? I don't know the answer to that. Again, this is all pretty fresh, but it's interesting because on paper, Clemson is an unbelievable program. You don't really look twice when someone goes there, but from Penn State, which has played very good football every single year, for the last few years, that is surprising. Also, one thing about Penn State that I think is unique is James Franklin is such a good, and his team, such a good recruiter, such a good evaluator, right? So the defensive talent at Penn State has been absolutely unbelievable every single year. This past year was no different. So you've had some great defensive minds go through Penn State, but they've been coaching multiple first rounders, second rounders, day one and day two picks, freakazoid athletes, really good physical traits across the board at that school. So, you know, you've had a good run of defensive coordinators. It's hard to get 4 good ones in a row, but I think they can do it because of what they're going to have personnel wise. That's, of course, the Penn State side. There's also the Clemson side of the equation.
Well, and if you're a Clemson fan, just real quick, you're getting a guy here as we saw previously. When did Clemson have as much success as they've ever had with Brent Venables as defensive coordinator, a guy who pretty much ran that side of the ball by himself? You'd expect something similar with Tom Allen here, where Dabo doesn't really have to worry about that side of the football in a sense.
Yeah, and if you look at what you hear about Tom Allen, going back to when he was in Indiana, which, by the way, you know, before Cignetti was the darling of college football in Indiana, Tom Allen had a lot of success there on his initial run and was, really talked about as a head coach there. Of course, things got stale. Indiana is not an easy place to sustain winning. We'll see if Cignetti can sustain what he's done this year. But culture is something you associate with Clemson football, the importance of culture. That's why they don't go in the portal like other teams. That's why they recruit a certain type of kid. So that's something Dabo preaches. It's something he practices. And with Tom Allen, you hear it a lot. Here's a quote from James Franklin. This before Allen left. If you know Tom has just been awesome. There's not a better guy in the profession. His humility is impressive. His faith is impressive. He's been awesome. He jumped right back into this thing and is really doing a great job. And I think his family's enjoying it. I think Tom's enjoying it. We're enjoying having him. We feel blessed to have Tom Allen and his family. So this is a guy who, again, you hear about the person first before you even talk about the coordinator from James Franklin. He's not afraid to get in the mix. He jumped in a dog pile at Ole Miss, chipped his tooth. He body slammed a Hoosier safety after a big pick against Michigan. So he's in the mix, right? Big culture guy. His mantra is LEO, love each other. So that sounds like something you'd hear out of Clemson. Played with a big nickel at Clemson. That's something, at Indiana. That's something maybe you see at Clemson was, think back to like Isaiah Simmons and guys like that. He's someone who's been multiple, but usually a 4-down front. Again, Penn State with the pass rushers you had, you didn't have to do too much with those guys other than let them eat. But he not only did it at Penn State, he also made improvements on defense at Indiana. Looking from 15 to 17, Indiana had the nation's most improved defense, 169 fewer yards allowed per game. Passing defense went through the roof. They did have some really good corners there at that school. So, it's not just a one-year job here at Penn State that you're saying, hey, we're catching a rising star. This is someone who's been around, who's been proven, and appears to be a culture fit when you just do some research and hear a little bit more about Tom Allen, the person, and what he stands for.
Yeah, without a doubt. And like we said, Penn State, they're losing him to Clemson. But
wait, before we even straight, just one last thing on Clemson I want to get to, Pete, which is this offense next year. When you look at it on paper, I know they lose Brittingstool. I know they lose Phil Maffa. Offensive line will have some movement, but another year with Matt Luke in the offensive line to get it right. And then K. Klubnik, when he started running the football, I think he became a totally different player. You saw it all the way through the playoff. K. Klubnik is going to enter the 2025 season as one of the best quarterbacks in college football. His young receiver room is absolutely outstanding. Moore, Wesco, some of these guys are just really, really good players, are going to continue to get better. So offensively, you feel good about what Clemson has. You have pieces on defense with Sammy Brown, others. You have some very good, talented defensive linemen. Not enough. Not what you had when Clemson was really rolling. So can the good corners as well. Can they get this defense to come together? And most importantly, here's the key stat, because it's not just defense as a whole. To me, it's one particular stat. Last year, Penn State, 7th in the nation against FBS opponents, yards per rush allowed. Clemson, 90th in the nation against FBS opponents, yards per rush allowed. You saw it against Texas in the playoff. That is what Clemson needs to return to, is strong run defense. Because if you can't stop the run, you cannot win in college football.
Without a doubt. So Penn State, they've got to figure out who their new defensive coordinator is going to be. But let me tell you, they got some great news on this day, as both running backs are going to be returning, Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. And it's interesting is a lot of people had Singleton as a top 5 back in this class. Katron Allen as more of a later round pick. But these guys this year ran for over 2,200 yards, 20 touchdowns. They both ranked 10th and 11th respectively all time at Penn State. And if they stay healthy next year, they could finish as the number 1 and number 2 rushers in program history. So I'm sure NIL goes a long way in getting guys back to school, but that had to have been part of this discussion for them, saying, man, that'd be pretty cool if we could finish as the top 2 in program history. They're joining Drew Aller, Zane Durant. So Aller, of course, the quarterback, Zane Durant, D tackle, as other guys who are announcing who announced that they're going to be back for another year. So they're really going all in from the roster point of view there.
Yeah, we'll watch Dennis Sutton. He, to me, was one of the best players on the field in that semifinal. I mean, he was outstanding. Does he want to come back and sort of be the star of the show with Abdul moving on? So we'll see how that situation sorts out. But Penn State's going to be a preseason favorite because of what they bring back in the backfield, quarterback and running back. The decision to me, it kind of reminded me of Nick Chubb and Sony Michel back at Georgia, where you kind of said, all right, these are two great running backs. Running back is a position where you get injured. Of course, we saw that with Nick Chubb, right? Where he had injuries, and Sony Michel too. So it's a fragile position. Not fragile is the wrong word, but it's just you take such a beating that your body only has so many carries, right? So usually when guys have a chance to go pro at that particular position, more than any other, they will go pro. So the fact that you have not just one, but two premier 1,000+ yard backs coming back at the same time, the only thing I can think of is that Chubb and Sony Michel team for Georgia. That was very much a strong culture there at Georgia. Those guys really personified it, and that team ended up winning a lot of ball games. Say what you will about James Franklin. I'm a fan of James Franklin. Obviously, that's a source of a lot of debate in the college football world, just where he is in the pecking order, if he can get over the hump. I won't get into all that. All I'll say is this. You have to have a pretty good culture if you have a guy like Drew Aller coming back, number one. I know he didn't have a great playoff game, but you talk about the NFL draft, he probably at worst is third in this class if he goes pro, even with the very, very tough game against Notre Dame. Okay, beyond that, these two, right, on offense, it's getting these guys to come back says a lot about what James Franklin is building from a culture standpoint. The fact that people, maybe not coaches, assistant coaches, but certainly players want to be a part of this team and believe in this team's ability to go win a national championship, a Big Ten championship here in the year 2025.
And that Sony Michel Chubb, those decisions were pre-NIL, so I'm sure those guys were playing for free.
Well, I sense the sarcasm in your voice, but I'll tell you this, they definitely were playing for a lot less, right? So, that's something we got to talk about with this decision. Or a Carson Beck coming back to Miami, right? Some of these decisions that guys have an opportunity to go pro and still decide to come back and play. It's a new world with not only NIL, but now you have the rev share, right? So the money's going up. The numbers you're hearing for quarterback are all far in excess of what Cam Ward made last year as the premier quarterback on the market. So people are getting paid more. If you're Penn State, we've talked so much about, and it's going to be a theme throughout the offseason, about Penn State needing to upgrade at wide receiver. You saw the game against Notre Dame. The receivers gave you absolutely zero production. It's been well publicized, well documented. So they've improved that position. You go to Troy, get Devontae Ross, highly productive player. Kyron Hudson, there's kind of a weird situation at wide receiver at USC. A lot of guys moving on, but he had a spectacular catch early in the season, probably the catch of the year right away, and he's got a lot of talent. I'm not saying he and Ross are the absolute answer to match what Ohio State does, but you'll get better production out of those guys than what you have returning. So much focus on wide receiver, but the running back position would have had a ton of production to replace if these guys were to go pro. And I'm not sure, looking at the roster for Penn State, if they had the combination of size and athleticism and experience on hand to replace these guys. So the fact that they're coming back is an incredible boost and puts less pressure on the passing game with Drew Aller and these receivers to make that leap. You still need them to make that leap. That's how you're going to beat a Notre Dame and Ohio State. But there's not as much pressure because you're not also at the same time replacing a running game, which I'm looking at the numbers against FBS competition. You're talking about 16th nationally in yards per game rushing, and that's without a quarterback that runs. You look at the top 16 rushing teams, most of them have running quarterbacks to boost that total. To have a passing quarterback and still be 16th nationally in rushing, that means you got some special backs, and Penn State certainly does, not only this year, but in 2025.
Anthony Manzano asking, did Quinn Ewers announce he's coming back and he might transfer to Notre Dame, or did he announce for the draft? So nothing yet, but he's got to decide here in the next few days here, because that the deadline for the draft is coming up here. So should be interesting. I have a feeling he's coming back to school.
To me, I would go just because I don't know how much better he's going to get, right? Becca has the injury, so he can't throw. If you're Ewers, you can go. You had a good playoff run. It didn't end the way you wanted to, but it's not like he was totally inept. He didn't have a game as bad as Drew Aller did in that last game where you said, wow, I really, that I need to get the stink off. He didn't play, great against Ohio State, but I mean, he played okay given the competition. It wasn't like a total no way you can go pro after a game like that type of situation. Plus, he had the great performance against Arizona State in the second half. So, to me, I think if I'm yours, I go pro. You got enough players around. There's not that many players in the draft. You got enough starts, enough production, and you throw well in the workouts. You get healthy before the workouts. Someone picks you up in the pros and develop there. That's what I would do. But you've heard this persistent buzz that he will be playing college football next year. Georgia still needs a quarterback, depending how you feel about Gunnar Stockton. Notre Dame, Marcus Freeman said he needs he's going to start one of his in-house quarterbacks at against Miami in the opener. We'll see. I personally think he should. I like Angeli, but we'll see how that shakes out. And then, Ohio State, do they trust Julian Sain that much? Right? Tavian St. Clair, the true freshman, is he going to be ready to play?
Devin Brown's there too.
Yeah, is he going to stick around? Is he going to reverse course now that Cal has their quarterback with Sagapolitelli? So a lot of moving pieces still at the quarterback position among some of the biggest programs in the country. Throw Alabama in that mix. I mean, does Alabama really have a quarterback you feel great about going into next year to replace Jalen Milroe? I'm not sure.
Well, there's reports talking about Ewers here real quick before we get to our next topic, but there's reports that Alabama, Ohio State could be interested in him, as you were just mentioning, whether or not they trust Sain or not. Ewers has the familiarity with Ohio State, but it seems like he is on pretty good terms with the situation there, right? Jack Sawyer, his former roommate, they had a moment coming off the field there. So it doesn't seem like there's like too much bad blood there. So is that a fit for him? UNC needs a quarterback, and they're looking like they're ready to spend. So very interesting situation to look at here.
Yeah.
But moving along here, an interesting pickup for Kentucky as Mikey's Grace is now a Wildcat. The former South Dakota pass rusher had a breakout season in the FCS level this past year. He's going to have a couple years of eligibility because he was a redshirt sophomore. 64 tackles, 18.5 tackles for loss, 9.5 sacks, 3 pass breakups, a couple forced fumbles, and had a long recovery for touchdown as well. And D, when you look at some of these guys who are transferring up from the FCS level, the question when you watch some of them is, do they have the size, do they have the speed? Everyone's there at that level for a certain reason. But with this guy, he looks like he has that size and that speed, as I'm going to pull up some of the clips here. But, man, he's moving for his size.
Yeah, this is watching this guy's film, and I watched a little bit. He has a lot out there, both clips, so and just watching him move. He looks like an SEC player playing in the FCS at the FCS level, and was always been a separator for SEC teams and the rest of FBS. Forget FCS. Honestly, separator from them and the rest of Power 4 historically has been the defensive line and the ability for SEC teams to recruit NFL defensive linemen in waves with certain body types, certain physical specs. Kentucky fans know that because Kentucky's had some great defensive linemen over their history, including this year, Deion Walker, Josh Allen, one of the best in the NFL. So they've had defensive linemen all over the place. This is a guy, again, you watch these clips, flexible, twitchy. He changes direction well. Just looking at the body type, he's got that big lower body, which he uses to get under, he can get under offensive tackles and push him back. There you see him. Look at the closing speed here. I mean, again, just the physical. This is not like a try-hard guy. This guy who physically looks like an SEC player. It's interesting because he's not like a grades kid. Sometimes you'll see, maybe a guy that signs with a big school out of high school and then he drops to the FCS level. That was not this guy. I mean, he was FCS the whole way and just ended up being a late bloomer. We talk about SEC, chose Kentucky over Mississippi State and Georgia.
Look at him standing up here.
Oh, yeah. You see him standing up. You see him in the 4-point stance. You see him all over the place. And he was, 64 tackles, 18 tackles for loss, 9.5 sacks, 3 pass breakups, 2 forced fumbles, fumble recovery touchdown, FCS All-America. The production is outstanding. But to me, the production is nice, but it's the traits. When you talk about moving from the FCS level to the SEC, I think the traits are here with this guy, which is why, again, look at the schools that are recruiting him. Kentucky, Mississippi State, which has had really good defensive linemen over the course of their run here. First rounders. Georgia. I mean, what do you have to say about Georgia's defensive line? So these are schools that know what defensive line looks like. Obviously, Mississippi State, maybe not lately, but this guy I think will fit right in. He'll have to earn his spot, but when you look at this position translating, it's really not about production. You know from the NFL draft, Pete, you've recruited guys at this level. You've recruited guys that are maybe late bloomers, including one of your first-round pick clients, Titus Howard. So it very much is about the physical traits more than anything if you're projecting someone like this to go to the NFL or to go, in this case, to the SEC, a significant step up, even though he's coming from a really, really good football program with the South Dakota Coyotes.
And if you're a Kentucky fan, you're losing, of course, who is a former big recruit, Keyshawn Silver. You lose him on the inside, but you add David Gusta from Washington State, a guy who's 6'3", 302, not a huge D tackle, not the same player as Silver, but productive and was wanted by other SEC schools. You're adding Cameron Olds at edge, also from Kent State, who was a 4-star transfer. He was actually rated a little bit higher than Mikey's Grace as a transfer, 6'4", 245. So you pair Olds with Grace off the edge there. You add Gusta as well on the interior. You got to feel pretty good about what you've added here to the defensive line if you're a Wildcats fan.
Yeah, look, what's Mark Stoops known for? In my book, Pete, I don't know if you agree, evaluation, right? Yeah. This guy's one of the best evaluators in the country. You see it with Kentucky consistently producing NFL talent. You're seeing now at corner. They'll be producing an NFL talent. You've seen that defensive line consistently. You've seen that at running back, right? Even wide receiver, right? They lost them, but Dane Key and Barian Brown, two of the highest ranked transfers on the market. Dane Key going to Nebraska, Barian Brown going to LSU. Quarterback-wise, obviously their quarterback situation, pretty unique with Brock Vandergriff retiring, but Will Levis, NFL quarterback from there, Devin Leary, both transfers, but guys that ended up getting a chance at the next level. So Kentucky knows how to pick them, and offensive line, they've had a few guys go pro. I think this is a guy that could potentially be a pro just from a body type perspective, watching him against FCS competition. But as we know, it's going to be, what's the SEC slogan?
Just means more.
It just means more. So we will see how it looks on that level of competition. But I was quite frankly surprised when I started watching this kid move around because he looked a lot bigger and more athletic than I expected.
This next one here, D, it may not draw the biggest headlines in the world, but it's one that I'm really intrigued with. As former Arkansas wide receiver Dazmin James is headed to Cal. He had a big breakout game in that bowl game. Only three receptions, but for 137 yards and a touchdown. And this is a guy with major speed. I mean, 10-4, 10-4-6 in the North Carolina 4A state championships in high school. 6'2", almost 200 pounds. So not a small guy either. Cal, looks like you're going to have a young guy at quarterback with Jaylen Sagapolatelli, coming over after he had signed with Oregon, was previously committed to Cal, but signed with Oregon and is now part of Cal's team. So you're trying to add some pieces there as Fernando Mendoza is gone. And even last year with Mendoza, the issue offensively was, I think, your lack of explosive skill position players. Dazmin James, I think, could potentially solve that issue.
Yeah, your tight end was the leading pass catcher last year for Cal with Mendoza. So I think some of that's also offensive line.
Jaden Ott was hurt as well.
Right, and can your offensive line hold up enough for you to throw the ball downfield? But look, this team, I haven't seen a team's fortunes change as quickly here as Cal in both directions, right? So it's amazing. You look at Cal, and I was out there for the game against the University of Miami, which was just an unbelievable atmosphere. College game days there. Everybody having a great time. Stadium was electric. Just a great showcase for Cal football. So you have all that. One of the stuff in the season to put Cal right in the forefront in their first ACC season. Then you lose Fernando Mendoza, and then you lose all your receivers, Isaiah Hunter, Mikey Matthews, Josiah Martin, and you're saying, wow, this thing is falling apart. You had something great going, and now it's falling apart. Then so quickly, things change, and now Jaren Kiwi Sagapolatelli, who was going to go to Cal at one point, flipped to Oregon on signing day, gets to Oregon, says, I don't like it. I see a clear path at Cal with Fernando Mendoza gone. I was going to play behind him if he had stuck around. Now I can go there and potentially start. And the whole picture changes. So Sagapolatelli, if you're going to be your Dylan Raiola, right, he's going to be the guy that you put starting as a true freshman. And look, he's got to earn the job. But you did lose, your backup quarterback as well. Chandler Rogers moving on. So the path is wide open for Sagapolatelli. He needs receivers. You add Jacob DeJesus from UNLV, a veteran, a captain, not the biggest guy in the world, but somebody that's reliable, that knows how to play receiver, that's got snaps. That's your rock. That's going to be the safety valve for Sagapolitelli. Now you need the explosiveness. Sagapolitelli, a lot of people think that left hand, that left arm is the best arm in the country coming out of high school. And this is a great class of quarterbacks this year in the 25 class, best I've seen. So with that unique arm strength, all-time leading passer in Hawaii history, beating Dylan Gabriel's record, you can't just have the reliable DeJesus. You need somebody that can really take the top off in a unique way. And Dazmin James, 10.46, 21.06, kind of a non-factor at Arkansas until that bowl game where he had the 3 receptions for.
Well, look at the Arkansas fans. Sorry to cut you off, but this is an Arkansas fan saying all we did was advertise Dazmin James to other schools portal shopping. And then to your point as well, there was another tweet here from an Arkansas fan that says, if you were Dazmin James and watch all those other wide receivers start in front of you, you'd transfer too.
And, look, part of this is, I think with Dazmin James, and I don't know this to be a fact, but you've seen it, Pete. He's probably thinking, man, I should have been the feature the whole time. You feature me for one game, I get 146 yards. I am that guy, and they don't appreciate me. I'm not saying that's accurate. I'm not even saying that's how he feels. But just from the outside, I can see that happening because I've seen it happen with other players. So maybe that's the case. And he's saying, look, Cal's featuring me. They're pairing me with a young quarterback. There's a redshirt freshman with 3 years of eligibility. So maybe he could have 3 years, playing with Sagapolitelli, or 2 years playing with Sagapolitelli, then an NFL future. That, I'm sure, is how he's looking at it, because when you have a young quarterback, you now have the ability to attract receivers to Cal. And if I'm Cal, I am doing, look, they've been a defensive program right under Coach Wilcox, and that's served them well the last couple of years going to a bowl. But I would treat Sagapolitelli different than Fernando Mendoza and say, listen, we are going full bore, building around you, not necessarily building the best team, which, of course, you want to have the best team. But when you have a player like this that can be an NFL first-round type pick just on an arm strength standpoint and recruit ranking standpoint, give him every chance to succeed. Invest in him succeeding, because if he succeeds, your whole program will succeed. Hopefully, it doesn't go in the portal right after the Mendoza thing, but at least put him in a position to be successful. Because if he's confident, productive, throwing to receivers, well protected, running the ball, your whole program is going to be elevated just by virtue of him being such a marquee player.
Sergeant Moorhugh says UNLV got a mention. We'll be talking Alex Orji here in a few topics, so stay tuned for that. Big pickup for them at the quarterback position. Interesting room building over there in Las Vegas for Dan Mullen. So we'll dive into that in just a bit here on Group Chat Football Live. Appreciate everyone on with us live right now. Remember to like and subscribe to the channel. So Notre Dame, they're one of the two teams still alive here, playing for the big trophy, and they have a big addition for next year, and that is former Virginia Tech standout safety Jaylen Strowman. So he missed pretty much the entire year, got hurt against Vanderbilt in game 1, game that Vanderbilt really announced themselves to the college football world, and Strowman got hurt in that game, so missed the season, but had a really big junior year. And after that injury, sat out the rest of the year, so preserved this last year of eligibility. And he's going to be headed to Notre Dame, where it's a pretty young room there. Aiden Schuler has been a starter for them this year, but they're losing Watts, their other starter. So they're going to need someone to come in here, and that's Strowman, who is coming in as the only scholarship safety with only a year of eligibility left. So everyone has multiple years. It's a young room. So Strowman coming in as a guy who's experienced, and if he can get back healthy here, right, as he's been out, so he should be ready to go 100%. But really impressive player in the ACC his junior year.
Yeah, brothers in the NFL. He would have been in the NFL if not for his injury, right? So it's kind of like a Carson Beck situation to Miami, where the reason he's in college as opposed to the pros is the injury. If not for the injury, this is a guy who would be hearing his name called in the NFL draft. That's how he was projected before the season. Again, his brother was a draft pick for the Washington Redskins, his brother Greg. So 6'1", 200 pounds. You look at the stats, like you mentioned. He has been very, very productive. And as a junior, which was his best year, 55 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, 4 pass breakups, quarterback hurry, all over the field against Purdue. And I think at the safety position, you want guys that are experienced and are smart. I mean, look, there's a Caleb Downs that comes in as a freshman and tears it up. But typically safety is a position where you got to know what's going on. You got to have some experience seeing things. And look, first game for Notre Dame, obviously they're playing for the biggest prize here coming up, but they're going right into a typical Notre Dame schedule with a lot of big-time games. Their first game is going to be at Hard Rock Stadium against the University of Miami and the aforementioned Carson Beck. So when you lose the heart and soul in many respects of your defense and Watts, to just give that role to a young player who hasn't played can be tough. So Strowman is someone who should walk right in. He's played big games. Again, NFL physical talent, NFL bloodlines, and just a ton of experience. It'll maybe take some time to learn what Coach Golden wants to do on the defensive side of the ball, but he will learn faster than most being a veteran, and there's no substitution for the experience of having seen it, right, and been able to perform at the Power 4 level, which Strowman has done. Again, this Virginia Tech defensive backfield, man, they had you would have thought all these guys were going to be going pro, and now so many filtered around the rest of the country at other big-time schools.
And it's interesting because you see in the NFL how a lot of the moves you make as a team in the offseason is because you're playing within your division. How do you match up in your division? I'm not saying that's the case here, but it is interesting that Strowman, a guy in the ACC, they have familiarity with, playing Miami week 1. I'm not saying that move is just for that game, but I think when you see these kind of interconference, yes, Notre Dame's an independent, but they're very familiar with ACC football, right? When you see this sort of movement, it just makes you wonder, how much of it is because of certain matchups on the schedule next year.
And to your point, Pete, because people are going to scream, we're not in the ACC. They start the season at Miami. They also play Pitt, Boston College, NC State, Syracuse. So, I mean, you're basically playing
a guy who has played a lot of these guys.
This is an ACC schedule. So that to me is a fair point, Pete, and interesting that you're basically playing an ACC schedule next year for Notre Dame, and you have a guy who has excelled at the ACC level.
Without a doubt. So keeping it moving here, we're going to the Big Ten now, and Connor Moore, who was the top available tackle in the transfer portal at this point. He was 12th at the beginning of the process, and he played at Montana State the last few years, was 2-time FCS All-American, and he's headed to Michigan State here. Michigan State's added a lot here on the offensive line through the portal, but first team All Big Sky honors, has played both guard and tackle, started all 12 games in 2023 as a freshman. So he's going to have a couple years of eligibility left here, and was the number 129 prospect in the portal.
Yeah, and we've seen guys like this have success, obviously in college, right? But also in the pros. You think about Spencer Brown for the Buffalo Bills, Trevor Penning for the New Orleans Saints. So offensive tackle is a very unique position in that there's only so many guys with the height and the athleticism to play this position at a high level, but there are those guys at the FCS level, usually more late bloomers, maybe a big tight end that blows up, right? So that does happen. Connor Moore from Millbury, Ohio, kind of right in the middle of Big Ten country, but develops late. He's a 4-star transfer, was certainly not a 4-star coming out, pretty much an unranked player, but a 2-time All-America. Got an assist from Tom Izzo on the recruiting front. Goes to the basketball game, commits shortly thereafter. He was on the radar for a lot of big schools, about Auburn in the SEC, Missouri in the SEC, Michigan in the Big Ten, and then Cincinnati. It was originally scheduled to visit Ohio State. That visit gets canceled. So there were some schools in the mix for this player. Very productive. First team All Big Sky. Playing guard, tackle, Michigan State. And just watching him play, the thing that jumps out is the athleticism, the quickness, the suddenness. I don't see a ton of power at this level, which, that's one of those things that you see number 72. I don't know if, you're not going to really know how much power and strength he has until he's out there in those practices in the Big Ten, pushing up against those very physical Big Ten defensive ends and defensive tackles and linebackers. So we'll see how that looks when it's like on like. But just from watching him here and some of these clips that were posted, he had I think the twitch, the fluidity, the ability to get to the second level, that jumps out. And that's not something that is dependent necessarily in competition. You could see when a guy can move and move with suddenness, and he does have that. So I think the question is going to be, is how much is he going to develop in an offseason from a strength standpoint? There you see him here at guard number 72, opening up that hole. So he does have that versatility to play inside and outside. But the strength part, I think, is going to be the key. But the movement stuff, the quickness, getting out of his stance, I think that's all there. And of course, at that level, he's been extremely productive.
Yeah, and again, Michigan State's been active in the portal in terms of offensive line. He is their fourth pickup in the portal. Matt Golban from Wake Forest, guard and center. Caleb Carter, a guard from Western Carolina. Another interior lineman, Luka Vincic from Oregon State as well. So at the tackle spot, Moore will be competing with a couple returning starters there in Stanton Ramil and Ashton Lipo. But at the end of the day, I don't think a guy like him is coming in there to be a backup. So,
well, here's returning starters can mean a lot of things, right? When Notre Dame returns a lot of starters on the offensive line, it means they're probably going to be pretty good next year because they were pretty good this year. When Michigan State returns a lot of starters on the offensive line, that doesn't mean the same thing, at least this season. Of course, Michigan State has a long tradition of good offensive linemen, really, really good offensive linemen. But in terms of what they have this year, Michigan State was 120, just FBS against FBS, so excluding FCS stats. Michigan State was 120th in the nation in sack percentage. 9.5% of their dropbacks resulted in sacks when they were on the offense. So that is as bad as it gets. So it's no secret that everybody's job is on the line. They're going to bring in a lot of transfers. They're going to try to promote competition, whether it's from the FCS level, again, multiple FCS guys in that mix, guys from the ACC, guys from all over the country coming in to compete and elevate that room, because that performance as far as pass blocking was unacceptable. You got a young quarterback that you're trying to develop. You need better protection than what we saw last year.
Without a doubt. So as we continue to move along here, one of our favorites, UNLV, Dan Mullen, very, very interesting pickup addition to the quarterback room. As former Michigan quarterback Alex Orji is transferring to the Rebels. And it's interesting because he's joining a room now where former Virginia quarterback Anthony Calandria is already over there. And I think both you and I were big fans of that Calandria addition. But Orji is a mega talented athlete, has had some really good moments for Michigan, even played in that national championship game against Washington a couple years ago. We understand what he brings to the table as a runner, has some development to go as a passer, but I'm interested to see how Dan Mullen utilizes him in this offense, because I think there might be more to this than just saying, hey, come in here and compete for a quarterback spot. I think Mullen has a real plan for him.
2 words, Tim Tebow. Right. So Dan Mullen first put his name on the map at the SEC level when Tim Tebow was a true freshman. Now, at that time, the starting quarterback was not Tim Tebow. It was Chris Leak, who was more of a passing quarterback, even more of a pure passer than Calandria is. Calandria can move around a little bit, playmaker, but not really a runner. Leak was a pure passer. So when you get into these short yardage situations, this was in the Gators' second national championship season, Dan Mullen, who was the offensive coordinator for Urban Meyer, would insert Tim Tebow as a short yardage back, where he took the snap. He was playing quarterback, but his role was effectively a short yardage back to get those first downs and potentially, sometimes act as a decoy where the team's worried about him keeping it, and then the running back's able to get by. He presented all sorts of problems. And that year, he also made a lot of big plays, big chunk plays in big games. LSU comes to mind as a play action passer, right? So 3rd and 2, you're bringing in Tebow. Everybody thinks he's either going to run or hand it off, and then he drops back and throws, and you get a huge play. Alex Orji gives you the ability to do that. First, you start with the size, 6'3", 235 pounds, big guy. He's used to running. He's used to running at the Big Ten level. Of course, this is going to be a step down in competition for him. He can throw. Now, look, you're talking about, starting quarterback at Michigan, then no, he cannot throw at that level. Starting quarterback at UNLV, I'm not sure he could throw at that level if he's competing with Calandria. But you look at the completion, 25 of 47 passes, 150 yards, 3 touchdowns. As a quarterback, that's a no-go. But as a threat to throw when you're expecting him to run, he can complete passes, especially when the box is stacked and he's thrown over the top of people's heads. He has enough passing to do that. So I think that really is what jumps out. Of course, I think Dan Mullen's recruiting Orji is more than that and saying, listen, that when I'm talking about Tim Tebow in 2007, when he was in 2006, when he was very much a gimmicky kind of player, just a running quarterback and short yardage. In 2007 and beyond, Tim Tebow developed into a Heisman candidate, and a winner, one of the best quarterbacks in college history. I'm not saying Orji's going to be that, but I'm saying if you're recruiting him and you're Mullen, you're saying, look, I can use you as a gadget player, but I'm going to continue to develop you as a quarterback, and maybe we can get you to the point where I build the whole offense around you like I built around Tim Tebow. Again, I would bet my money on Calandria as far as the starting quarterback for UNLV, but at least it's on the table and it brings some competition to the room.
Without a doubt, and Mullen continues to add as many weapons as he can to the offense over there, and we understand he's an offensive guy and can put guys in position to get the most out of their abilities. So I don't expect anything different here with the Orji move.
And you saw that him play the same role at Michigan. I mean, he was a specialist player at Michigan too, when he wasn't the main quarterback. So it's not like that's unfamiliar to him.
Could you see both of them on the field at the same time?
Who knows?
That's where I'm thinking with this too. Because look, Orji's a guy where his brother Anthony Orji is an NFL linebacker, plays for the Saints. I'm not saying that, of course, he wants to play quarterback, but he is a high upside athlete that could probably play another position or two at the next level. Not saying he's Taysom Hill, but I'm telling you the sort of athlete that he is, and we've seen flashes of it. But I think he's got that sort of ability where Mullen can get that sort of creative and maybe get him the ball. If he's open to that, which that's how I'm thinking with this move.
And the size is there too, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just the athleticism, it's the athleticism at that size. That opens up so many potential positions, similar to Taysom Hill, right?
And remember Trey Burton at Florida, and Mullen wasn't there at that time, but Trey Burton was a guy who ended up having an NFL career out of being, he was an H-back tight end, but he was a guy who played all over the field at the college level.
And you look at a picture of this guy, man, I mean, and just seeing him on the field at the Big Ten level, the guy, he stood out with his size. This is not like Pat White, who was a great running quarterback but was skinny. This guy can really knock people over. Our guy Sergeant Moore, you excited for Orji? Maybe Mullen moves into running back. Yeah, we just talked about it. That's a potential outcome here. And look, I think he'll get a chance to compete at quarterback. But if it becomes apparent that, hey, Calandria or whoever else is going to be the quarterback, maybe he says, look, I tried at Michigan, didn't work out. Tried at UNLV, it didn't work out. My future is clearly going to be at a different position. I gave it my best shot. Let's make it happen here at what other position. Cornelius Ingram is a guy that I'm pretty sure overlapped with Mullen at the University of Florida, former quarterback who ended up being a really good tight end for them. Jordan Reed, was that while Mullen was there?
Yeah, I think it would have been Mullen was there. Mullen was there for 4 years from 2005 to 2008. So I think that maybe it was a little bit after. Let me pull up.
But another quarterback that kind of comes to mind that overlapped with Dan Mullen was Nick Fitzgerald at Mississippi State, who was a big guy running quarterback as well, had some success in the SEC as that big physical running quarterback. So Mullen knows how to use this kind of player. And I think this is a Big Ten athlete, a Big Ten body now playing at the G5 level. Excited to see the possibilities here. Again, we talked so much about UNLV because you could see the vision of what Mullen is trying to do. And if you can get this high school recruiting operation tuned up, which it was already recruiting at a high level for UNLV before he got there. But if he can recruit better out of high school here than he did at UF, which I think he will because of the lesser competition and the fact that Nevada has really improved as far as a football player producing state, if he can recruit better, he's going to have some NIL support, and he can get this offense looking exactly the way he wants it to look. I think you're going to see UNLV be a really, really good, really consistent G5 program. And at quarterback, you've gone from question mark to a clear vision of what Dan Mullen wants to do.
So, D, I think this is our first time actually talking about this next program that we're going to be talking about here on Group Chat Football Live, and that's BYU, as huge news for them over the weekend with four-star McKay Madsen committing to the Cougars, a top 200 recruit in the class, according to 247 Sports. And he committed during the Navy All-American game. Guy who plays both sides of the football. He's a linebacker. He's a running back. He's explosive, as I'll pull up some of the clips here. But BYU beats out the likes of Oregon, Arizona, and UCLA, as they're winning some recruiting battles these days. We see on the basketball side, they just landed AJ DeBonsa, biggest recruit in the country, and he has a nice NIL package waiting for him there. So BYU, huge pickup here with McKay Madsen. They're going to have to wait a couple seasons here, as he's going to be going on his 2-year mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of the Latter-day Saints. So he's not going to be joining them until 2027. But as I pull up the clips here, you're getting a big-time, powerful, twitchy athlete in McKay Madsen.
Yeah, this is a freak, right? That's the only way to describe it. You look at some of the track stuff. So in California, state champion in the shot put, 62 and 9.5, which is freakish. The discus 206.8. His PR in both 65 and 1/2, and then in the discus, again over 200. So this is a really, really, really good ability. The stats are unbelievable on both sides of the ball. The Under Armour camp, he was one of the fastest runners as far as the 40-yard dash, verified laser time. So he's got that speed. He has size. He's playing in Fresno, so it's not like he's playing in a school where there's a lack of competition. But this might be an older name for some folks. Some folks remember vividly what I'm talking about. Watching him at running back reminds me a ton of Luke Staley, who was a elite college football running back for BYU in the early 2000s. He just, look, obviously maybe it's because it's a white running back. That's going to be the easy comparison. But just even the running style, the body type, the way they're built, kind of upright runners, but super athletic, and guys that can make big plays that weren't just pounding it out, that had the ability to be explosive. I think Luke Staley had a yard per carry over 8 as yards in his last season of college football. So this is a guy who can do that. Obviously on the defensive end, tons of upside there with his explosiveness, all those throwing events. This guy can explode through tackles. But I think offense, to me, is a reasonable fit for him, especially at BYU. He has lateral quickness. He clearly likes to play running back. Talking to people or reading about some of the reports from this guy, they're talking about him as wanting to play offense. Which again, just watching him here and looking at some of these numbers, I think he has more than enough to play offense at BYU. Assuming he comes back from the mission ready to go, which I have no reason to think he won't. His size will play up a running back. The speed is there. And again, BYU fans in the comments, let me know if I'm off base here, but just the gait, the way he looks, the size, it's Luke Staley to me. If he's anything like Luke Staley, we'll be talking about one of the best players in college football.
Yeah, I saw something there on Twitter on the clip I was showing before that said Cam Scattaboo as well, but I think he's got a little bit more agility.
Yeah, so obviously the white running back comparisons are going to be apparent. But yeah, I think Scattaboo to me was very much contact balance, right, bouncing off people like a pinball. I mean, this guy's just a freak athlete. Now, Scattaboo was a really good athlete as well, but this guy is extremely athletic. He's been a linebacker. You're talking about one of the best linebacker athletes in America, which I think some teams would want to do. But look, what I've seen over the years is you don't just put players where you want them to be if they've been super productive at their chosen position. Better bet with a kid like this who's such a talent. You let them play their chosen position, and if they can, and let them compete. And if they can't cut it, you say, okay, listen, this is where you're stacking up here on this depth chart. We think your future is better served at another position. If he comes in and says, I want to play running back, and he's your best running back, well, you keep him at running back. You saw Marshall Faulk back in the day for San Diego State. The reason he ended up at San Diego State is because he wanted to go to Miami, and Miami recruited him at cornerback. However, from the Miami standpoint, Jim Kelly wanted to play quarterback. Penn State told him linebacker. Clint Portis wanted to play running back. Florida, his hometown school, told him safety. So you want to get guys to play the position they want to play at first. And if they can't hack it, you move it. Just get the freak talent in the building. And BYU has done that. Not always you see BYU getting these commitments during these All-America games. This was a huge one for him.
And he overtakes Austin Peay as the highest rated recruit in BYU's class. Actually, the first 4-star addition to BYU's class. Austin Peay rated as a high 3-star and 89 on 247 Sports. So really a nice chip to the recruiting class here. And man, what's this guy going to look like in a couple of years as he continues to grow and mature? He's going to be a grown man, as he already pretty much is, as we saw with some of those clips.
No, it's going to be fun to watch, man. I'm excited to see what he does. It's always cool when you see these just, again, unique, freaky athletic players. We'll have to wait a little bit for this one, but they, BYU, their program is back up and running. They were so fun to watch this year, and year in, year out, one of the most consistent, exciting, unique programs in college football.
So we'll wrap things up with a program in Colorado that we've spoken about a few times here on Group Chat Football Live, and the hiring of their new strength and conditioning coach. As you guys can see, D, you have your orange and green polo on. I have some Canes stuff behind me. We have our Canes Insight show that we do daily. So we're very familiar with Andreu Swasey, longtime strength and conditioning coach, a legend at Miami in terms of the guys that he's worked with, the Hall of Famers, which to me, when it comes to strength and conditioning coaches, the players, when you hear from them, that's what matters, right? And the players speak always. And when I say players, not just any players, we're talking about the best of the best, the legends of the legends, speak about this guy, Andreu Swasey, in the highest of lights, a guy who can really seem to get a lot out of players in terms of connecting with them on the level, because there's different types of strength and conditioning coaches, right? There's guys who are maybe more analytical than others. Coach Swasey, with speed, has been renowned for years as a speed guy, but someone who the players at the end of the day respect to the highest of levels.
Yeah, and you're talking about Hall of Famers, right, that have gone through Swasey's program. So he initially worked with Tommy Moffitt at University of Miami, who then moved on to LSU. Then he took over the show himself. And it wasn't just during the season. These were Hall of Fame players. You go think about Miami in the early 2000s, and I mean, the names, right? As far as the Andre Johnsons, the Sean Taylors, the John Vilmas, the Clinton Portis, Frank Gores, Kellen Winslow, Jeremy Shockey. I mean, we can go on and on and on. Reggie Wayne, Santana Moss. I mean, these are big time players. So the one thing that Miami was known for during that period where Swasey was at Miami was the guys that had moved on from the program or were currently Pro Bowlers in the league would come back and work out at Miami in the off season. These were, again, professional players, the Reggie Waynes of the world, the Santana Mosses, the elite of the elite. And when they came time for them to work out, they would come back to the University of Miami to work with Coach Swasey. So these were guys that had already been around, seen the best, been around NFL facilities, and they said, this is where we want to go. So Deion is very much building a program that appeals to those who want to play professionally, be stars, right? Be legends. If you're Travis Hunter, you're on your way to legend status with what he did this season. So when the legends of college football, and in some cases professional football, trust in Swasey, why can't you do that there at the University of Colorado? So I think he was controversial to an extent towards the end at Miami. Some people thought they needed fresher ideas, maybe someone with more of an academic background at that time, more of a sports science background. But the fact of the matter is, Miami's best performance at the NFL Combine and all these different metrics was while Swasey was the strength and conditioning coach. So,
and it's interesting you mentioned that about like the academic background. Colorado is retaining Maurice Sims, who was the head of strength and conditioning last year, and he's going to be still having a major role, a leadership role in the staff, where he's going to be the director of sports performance. So they're really just adding to the room. And as you saw in that video from Well Off Media, Deion's son, you guys go check that out on his page. When Swasey spoke to the team, he's a motivator And you mentioned guys coming back in the offseason, because in the offseason, as a NFL agent, someone who has sent players to Swasey in the offseason, not only for staying in shape, but NFL draft prep, is because sometimes if there's a guy who needs a little kick, maybe he's a little bit lazier than you'd like, Swasey can get it out of them. And guys go to him in the offseason too, because the offseason is a time that you're thinking, man, we just had a long season. I want to be chilling. I need someone to grab that out of me and to pull that dog out of me in these workouts so that I come ready to go in mini camp and then in training camp in the summer. So that's just my experience with him, as well as we've sent guys to him and can really get guys on the right track. So I think that combination with Maurice Sims there is going to be a nice duo if you're a Colorado fan.
Yeah, a lot of the controversy around Swasey, again, Miami, when Swasey left Miami, their program was having trouble across the board. It was not like he was some, outlier, right? The program was struggling at all facets. I think part of the reason why the players started slipping in combine performance and everything else was because the input from a recruiting standpoint wasn't as good. And also he didn't have the certifications that some other strength and conditioning coaches have. He's much more of a people kind of background, like old school kind of, let's say, Rocky IV, right? Maybe Rocky III, that kind of background, as opposed to the sports science stuff you see here. But like you said, Pete, you already have that in-house at Colorado. You have people that have all the certifications, all the sports science stuff. The position of strength and conditioning coach, and that the whole department has grown so much that he could fill a specific role, both from a mental standpoint, from kind of that old school, what's worked for so many years standpoint, that can elevate this program into something that has notoriety. And look, you might see, the summer in Colorado is pretty nice. You might see pros who typically go to Miami, right? Maybe they go to Colorado to train with Swasey.
They're in the West, closer to the West Coast there. So it's you tap into a different side of the country there.
Yeah. So that gives you more cachet, because, being Colorado, they're going to tweet all that out. Hey, Andre Johnson showed up, or whoever, right? So, I guess he's not even playing anymore. All the Swasey guys aren't playing. They'll be showing up. They'll be working out just to stay in shape. But
they may go visit Colorado just to go see him, like they do. Alvin Kamara is one of his, most touted clients, off-season clients. And it's interesting because what has he done since Miami? He was at FIU, kind of Butch Davis brought the band back together there, so to speak. And then, as Canes Cats Heat 305 is saying in the comments, he was at Columbus High School, my alma mater, and Columbus gave him a shout out, saying they, the last 3 years when he was there, took the team to new heights. And for those of you who aren't aware, Columbus, it's not quite IMG's level of facilities, but some of the best facilities in the country in terms of the weight room and stuff for their sports program. So Swasey was bringing, the pros were coming to Columbus High School. The equipment's fine, great. Like I said, very nice place over there, but it was really, again, because of Swasey. So they're going to a high school to go work out with him in the off season, just to show you the cachet that he has.
And they were winning championships too. So it's, So it's not like he was just in high school, goofing around. This was a serious operation. And of course, now you see him returning to the big time college football level. I happy to see it. I think it's a great fit. I think he fits in with what Deion's trying to cultivate, which is an environment of excellence, high performance, and guys who have been there before, sort of, old school, sharing what got them to the top. Nobody knows that more than Swasey, because he's seen the journey of so many top athletes who maybe came in as 2 stars, 3 stars. A lot of those Miami guys from the early 2000s, they were not 5 stars coming in. They were 2 stars, sometimes unrated, and then they ended up being, some of the biggest stars in the game. So he saw that journey. He's familiar with it. He can teach it.
Appreciate everyone who was on with us today on Group Chat Football Live. Remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel. We'll see what happens tomorrow, man. Every day, something crazier and crazier happens. The Tom Allen news was not very expected. There were some rumblings late last night that this was maybe in the works. But this carousel, we thought it was done. But as teams continue to trickle out of the playoffs here, and we still have 2 more to play, Could there still be some portal movement to go? Could there still be some coaching movement? We'll see. Group Chat Football Live. We'll see you guys tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.